Hello, welcome to this week's edition of the Record Rangers podcast in association with NordVPN. I'm Scott McDermott. I'm joined by my Record Sport colleague Andy Newport. Andy, Derek McInnes had his Ibrox bow last night. Friendly win against St Etienne. You were there. I watched it on the TV. What was your big takeaways for last night? Obviously, a few of the new boys get their Ibrox debuts as well. But what was your big kind of talking points, if you like, for the game?
I think it was pretty much what we were expecting from Rangers team still in pre-season. Obviously, been working hard, a lot of double sessions, legs will be tired. You never really get a true sense of where a team's at this stage of the summer when the guys have been putting in so much hard work. But I think there was a lot of things that we were expecting to see. We saw there was a couple of sort of budding partnerships throughout the team. But I think the main takeaway is that Rangers are still very much short in the final third in terms of that attacking flair, bit of guile. But Derek McInnes has sort of admitted that himself. Obviously, they're hoping, as he said last night, to get maybe 2 or 3 new faces in by the time they go to Dundee United next Friday night for the big Premiership kick-off. So yeah, I mean, work to be done in that sense. A worthwhile exercise. I think St Etienne, for a second-tier outfit in France, they look pretty sharp, pretty decent. But definitely, I think there's areas where Rangers really need to sharpen up, but also they need to bring in better quality because I think you saw already that especially in the wider areas, they just really don't have the players that I think are going to be able to get them to a title yet. Interesting, obviously, I think there was about 15 subs named in the team sheet last night, and yet Gisama and Atman don't get off the bench. So I think that in itself tells you where they are in the pecking order.
That was definitely a message for the manager. I think that he needs better wingers. Let's look at the kind of plus points. First of all, for me, I thought there was probably 3 big plus points. One was the goalkeeper. I thought looked really good, considering he'd only come in a couple of days previously. Listen, he didn't have a great deal to do, but I thought he made a really good save first half. I thought he was decent with the ball at his feet. Crucially, he looks like a goalkeeper that likes to have a high starting position, which I think is going to help Rangers.
Allow the
defence to push up. Rangers, it feels like the last couple of seasons, domestically, Rangers have actually lost a lot of goals just for balls over the top. And at times, I think Jack Butland was a bit, at a deeper starting position. Maybe he was a bit slow coming off his line, coming out his box. But I thought Pandur, there was real kind of promising signs there last night, so I thought that was good. Cammy Devlin's, I want to say, it wasn't a cameo because he came on at half time, but Derek McInnes said in his press conference afterwards, didn't he, that I think he made more tackles in the first 10 minutes, the second half, than the entire midfield had in the first 45. So he came in, and I thought immediately, almost like kind of grabbed that responsibility that you have to in a Rangers shirt and said, I need to make things happen here. No, he played with an urgency. He played at a tempo that I think Rangers are going to need to play at if they're going to win domestically this season. And I thought he kind of outshone the likes of Dan Neil and Tochi Chukwani, who obviously are coming in with bigger reputations, maybe bigger profiles. But it's early days. But I mean, personally, I always thought that Cammy Devlin would be a great signing for Rangers, and although it's only his first 45 minutes, I think he showed signs of why that is last night. And I think the third one for me was probably Shankland's performance as well. Well, he wasn't at his kind of scintillating best up front, but I thought he showed enough that when he drops off the front, he can link play really well. He can bring others into it. Of course, the partnership with Sharmiti is still very much in the early stages, and for Rangers' point of view, you're hoping that develops over time. But he obviously gets his goal with a penalty, which will have done in the world of good. And I just thought in general, he played as you'd expect him to play, given his kind of experience, chest kind of puffed out, ready to take on the mantle of being Rangers centre forward this season. So they were the three kind of big plus points for me. I don't know if you agree or if there are any others that.
No, I mean, I do. I mean, in terms of, I'll just go through the order you did them in, Pandur. I mean, what was sort of clear just from walking out from the beginning? He's not the same height as Jack Butland, and I kind of thought, he maybe doesn't fill the goal quite. He doesn't look quite as imposing. I know Jack Butland at times the ball could sort of go through him, so it didn't matter how big he was, but he just didn't have that same sort of stature about him. But as the game went on, you could see his athleticism, his agility. I mean, he came out and he took an early cross that was a sort of difficult angle, sort of dropping underneath his crossbar, and he did really well to pluck it out of the air. Makes a great save from the wee number 10 that St Etienne had. I think it was the boy Breum, who linked with Celtic a wee while ago. He obviously scored the goal, but he's a great sort of reflex stop down his right hand side to turn the ball round. And I agree with you. He was really high off his line and sharp off his line. I'm not convinced he's much of a better kicker than Butland is. There's a couple of ones he's got spooned up in the air. I think he's very much right-sided. I was saying to a couple of the boys in the press room afterwards that Butland, as much as he wasn't great with the ball at feet, he at least kicked the ball with both feet. He was probably poor on both feet. Whereas Pandor looks very much right-sided. And there was a wee incident where in the first half where the ball gets put on his left and he has to shift it on his right, and I think it was Breum again who sort of nearly tackled the ball over the line. So I think that's something just to be aware of. But in terms of shot stopping, which I think Rangers goalkeepers are always going to be judged on, not an awful lot to do, but that early save was a pretty good first good demonstration of his reflexes and agility. And then moving on to Cammy Devlin, I totally agree with you. Listen, I was over in Benidorm last week with the team when they were on pre-season. Me and a couple of other journalists travelled over for a couple of nights to speak with a few of the players and to speak with Derek McInnes, and he spoke about just Cammy Devlin's natural enthusiasm, natural energy that he brings, and just what a great character he is, and how he will make players better just by raising the standards, raising the energy levels in training. He defended a lot. I think there has been some sort of commentary from the odd fans saying that they're not sure that he's got the ball skills that will take Rangers to the next level. I think Derek McInnes went out his way to sort of defend that part and said he's a better footballer than people give him credit for. But really, it's about his energy, the standards he sets, the
tenacity,
the levels that he will bring in training and on the pitch. And I think you saw that, because as soon as he comes on, he starts zipping into tackles. Rangers start winning the ball back. And from there, Rangers were really comfortable in the second half. I mean, the first half was pretty drab, but it was St Etienne that definitely had the upper hand. But the second half, Rangers were in total control. That's because they won the ball back, and that's going to be key. I agree with you. He did sort of outshine the other two midfielders at the start of the game. I must admit, I'd heard a lot of good things about what Dan Neil had been providing in pre-season. Maybe it was just a bit of tiredness. I didn't think he was tight. He was tidy, but I didn't think there was nothing sort of stand out from his performance. And
no,
Tochi Chukwani, kind of, again, he came in last season and started looking fairly bright, but sort of faded towards the end of the season. So I can understand why Derek McInnes is keen to sort of bring in the extra characters for that middle of the park, despite you seem to have so many central midfielders. And then just in terms of Shankland, I agree with you. His intelligence, I think, showing through. There was just moments he was just dropping into wee pockets, finding space, and again, it allowed Rangers at times just to get themselves out of the park and play. I think that was at times Rangers could find difficult to get through to Tremity. I think Tremity at times, if he didn't have a partner, could become isolated. We saw Ryan Lediri when he was up alongside him last season, was just a willing runner, but didn't really provide the quality. I think you'll find that Shankland will we'll find the spaces, but we'll also have the ability to link up, which I think, especially along the first 20 minutes, I think there were some promising signs there. Again, things sort of faded as the game wore on. I think that was more that Rangers just didn't have the guys to get into the crossing positions and to really provide the ammunition for the two boys up front. But I think, as you say, for very early doors, there's a couple of encouraging signs there.
See, just on Chukwani, Andy, I mean, he's a strange one for me because he's a £4 million signing for Sturm Graz. I remember speaking to Max Johnson that played with him in Graz, and he absolutely raved about this guy. But he can do everything on the pitch. A number 6, he can be a number 8, he can get forward, score goals. I mean, we've yet to really see that. I mean, last season, it felt like they were kind of struggling to find the right position for him. They didn't know whether he was a sitting midfielder or whether he could play further forward. He showed wee glimpses of what he was capable of, but never over a kind of consistent amount of time. And last night, again, you're expecting him with a kind of pre-season behind him to really go and showcase his talent. And again, I thought he was really disappointing. I mean, I agree. I thought Dan Neil just did okay, and he'll need to get better and need to show more if he's going to be Rangers' kind of anchor in midfield. Now, we know they're in for, obviously, Dragojevic. There's interest in Herto Dahl. So he's clearly looking at, McInnes is clearly looking at more midfield reinforcements, despite, as you say, there'll been a list as long as your arm already there and guys are trying to get out. But, I mean, see with the likes of Chukwani and Diomande as well, by the way, are kind of put into that category as well. I thought was pretty poor again last night, even though he was slightly out of position. I mean, do you think Chukwani and Diomande, will the manager be looking at trying to attract offers for them as well? Or is that a case of these guys will be good squad players over the season and McInnes can make them better?
Plus, I think the manager will back himself to make all these guys better and raise them. I think, his mindset will be that, his man management skills will be able to sort of raise levels and get guys to realise the importance and the levels required of playing for Rangers. But there's no doubt that the people at the club acknowledge that, bodies need to be moved on. The squad's bloated. I think Dragojevic, and that's the pronunciation I'm going, even though the manager pulled me up about that last night. If he comes in, you get 11 guys then that can operate in one of the sort of 3-4 central midfield slots. That's just far too many, far too many. Listen, some of those guys are clearly got no future at the club, like Jose Cifuentes. I hate to say it, he's a lovely wee guy, but Lyle Cameron, I think you'll see him moving on. And Nadim Bayrami, I can't see him having a future at the club, especially in the sort of salaries on. So these guys will have to be moved on. But I agree with Chukwani. I mean, again, speaking to people at the club over the last couple of weeks, there's an acknowledgement there's a few people in the team that don't have the required focus skills at time, focus levels of focus. Too many players allow themselves to switch off for periods in games. That's clear. We saw that repeatedly last season. Rangers weren't able to maintain the intensity of their performances. That they could play for spells, 20 minutes, even 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, where they would look great and they would get themselves in a really good position. But then they would always have these momentary brain farts that allowed teams to come back in and hurt them, and that's what cost them a title last year. I think Chukwani is one of the guys that falls into that category. I think there's times where I think back to one of the Falkirk games towards the end of the season where I think I was sitting next to you and he was at fault for a goal just by not grasping where the danger was and clearing his lines and not acting with the right sort of attention to where the danger was. And so for me, he's somebody that needs to grasp that this is a club where you can't have periods where you're coasting. You can't, just jog along for 10 minutes and get your breath back. You have to be going flat out for minute 1 to minute 90. So until he gets that, I'm not sure you'll see him too much, because I think in Cammy Devlin, as we've just discussed, you've got a guy who's just a bundle of energy and will just run from first whistle to last. So, I think that's, if he can't get on board, if Chutwani can't get on board with just how the intensity levels in Glasgow, then I think you'll see he might find himself out the team.
Yeah. What about, just briefly, another kind of new boys, McCrory and Godfrey coming in at the back? What did you make of it? Well, I think Ross McCrory is what he is. I think he's a really good defensive player. I think up against tricky wingers in Scotland, McCrory will do quite well in that position. But when you're asking him to go and build play and get up and down the right flank and create and cross, I don't think that's his game. Obviously, the manager said Dujon Sterling is nursing a wee injury, but should play against West Ham on Sunday. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. Godfrey get the captain's armband last night. I know they're kind of sharing it out in pre-season. I thought started the game a bit shakily, but kind of almost grew into it. And my belief, my thinking with Godfrey, Andy, is that look, it might not work at Rangers. Obviously, he's in a loan deal. The club have got an option to buy him next summer. To me, the key thing for Ben Godfrey is he needs a run of games. You look at his last couple of seasons. This guy, he wasn't a £20 million player in the Premier League for nothing. That spell at Everton, obviously Norwich first and then Everton, where he really kind of made his name. He was playing every week. He had a consistent run of games. He's not had that the last couple of years, and I feel as if that's maybe why his career's kind of started to go in the kind of downward slide. Now, obviously Rangers are looking to move it the other way, and I think Derek McInnes can do that, but the fans maybe need to be a wee bit patient with him. I think he'll be a decent signing, a really good centre back, a really good pedigree, but he needs a run of games. And I think it was interesting that McInnes gave him and Fernandes both 90 minutes last night, because he needs his centre backs playing, and Godfrey in particular, as I say, needs a run of games.
To be honest, the reason why I think he gave them both 90 minutes because he's really not getting deals. McInnes admitted that himself last night after the game when I asked him about recruitment. There really are short and defenders. I mean, you think about Stuart Robbins is only senior left back at the club. John Suter, some obviously doubts about his future. Obviously missed the trip to Spain last week. Hasn't really seemed to move forward. I think there was some suggestions he's been back training with the team this week, but certainly wasn't on the bench last night. But just again to go through the order you spoke about, Ross McCrory. Listen, I mean, I think he's the type of player Rangers need to have at the club. Somebody that knows the club. Will run through a brick wall for the team. I think what's going to be harsh on him is that who he's replacing. He's coming in to take James Tavernier's slot in the team, and we all know that not just being the captain, but at times how fundamental James Tavernier was to how Rangers built up, how they created chances. That is not what Ross McCrory's game is going to be. That's why I think it's crucial that Rangers need to start bringing in the more attacking, the more skillful players further up the pitch, and not be reliant on their right back to be creating the bulk of their opportunities. So, I agree with you. I think running the mill games, Ross McCrory will do just fine. But I wonder if that, just given Dujon Sterling again, another injury. Okay, he should be fit for the weekend, but it's another injury for Dujon Sterling. How many of them have we spoke about over the last 3-4 years? I wonder if they might think about. Is that another area that needs to be looked at? I mean, there are still so many gaps in the squad that need to be filled. As I say, probably need one, maybe two centre backs. A left back. I think they need wingers on both sides, and probably another difference maker in midfield. Another playmaker, number 10 sort of type role. So I mean, there's plenty of work to be done. I was told that they were looking at maybe a maximum of 5. Now, if Dragicevic comes in, that's obviously one of them ticked off at. So, so I do think that there's a lot of work to be done still recruitment-wise, just in terms of Ben Godfrey and his partnership with Manny Fernandes last night. They looked like strangers, frankly, in the first sort of 10-15 minutes. St Etienne were getting so much joy getting them turned and getting in behind them. Now, again, I think that, as you referred to earlier on, was Rangers were looking to play a bit of a higher line. But to be honest, of the two centre-backs, I thought it was Fernandes that looked the ropier. It looked like he was the sort of Fernandes we saw at this time last season when he couldn't get a game for several months. Whether that's he's had his, he's just maybe not quite so sure of himself now that a manager's come in, or if he's just again a wee bit, legs are a wee bit tired from all the work they've been doing. I'm not sure, but he looked hesitant, and I think you and I were both times accused him of being a tad casual at times. I think you saw the worst of that last night, especially early on. But again, the longer the game went on, he looked more assured. So
I wonder how long it will be before Derek McInnes tells him to cut out the Cruyff turns in his own.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, I think just as I was talking to about Chukwani, I think Fernandes is one of those guys that falls under that sort of banner of somebody who
drifts,
can be a bit overly casual at times and can maybe not, can allow his a focus and his attention levels to drop. I think that if there's one guy to sort of drum that out of him, it'll be Derek McInnes. So I think that'll be one of McInnes' first priorities when it comes to money for Fernandes is you need to be at it again, first whistle to last. So, but Godfrey, yeah, I actually think his position at times, I thought his recovery work when Fernandes did get beaten was good. I think, I think there was one of the goals that the team conceded over in Spain. I think it was against the Malaysian outfit. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce their name. He looked like he was sort of treading water a wee bit. Again, I put that down to just the sort of number of miles they've been putting in the training pitch. I think he looked pretty quick at times. Recovery-wise, he sensed the danger and he was able to get himself back in and prevent a couple of goals. But yeah, there's no doubt all these partnerships, whether it be Godfrey Fernandes, whether it be Chermiti and Shankland, will it be Dan Neil and whoever's playing alongside in midfield, these are all going to take time to sort of bed in. They played, this was their 5th game in pre-season. The first one, it was in public. They've done 4 behind closed doors, but first couple of those, you didn't have a lot of the new signings, didn't have a lot of the international boys available. It was a patchwork team of the odd first team guy and some kids. So there maybe only a lot of these guys are only maybe 2 or 3 games into their schedule. Obviously, another one against West Ham. I imagine they might try and squeeze another one in, a closed door game in midweek next week before that game against Dundee United. But listen, if you're making mistakes, Derek McInnes would rather you're making them in these games rather than when the big kick-off comes at Tannadice.
And I know the manager said he's hoping to get a couple in. I think he said 2 before West Ham and then maybe another one before Tannadice. But as it stands now with the squad they've got at the moment, what would be your starting lineup at Tannadice? I mean, I think it's clear it'll be a 4-4-2.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it's the same, obviously, keeper, same back 4 as last night. I think in midfield,
I might be tempted to go with Sterling at right back if he's fit. I think Sterling offers you a wee bit more athleticism in terms of getting forward. So
I think Sterling would always be a pick ahead of McCrory. It's just as you say, his fitness. So if Sterling's fit, 100% Sterling at right back. As I say, I think midfield, Dan Neil and Cammy Devlin is your 2 central midfielders, and Shankland and Chermiti is your 2 strikers. It's just the wide areas, and as I say, listen, they might get guys in, obviously, that's going to influence it, but I think just based on last night, I'd probably go with the 2 wide players as Curtis and Asgard. Now, and I've been hugely critical of Asgard, as you know, last season. And I think he's got to provide so much more in a Rangers shirt if he's going to have a future at Ibrox. But I just sensed he's got a bit of confidence about him last night, obviously coming back for the World Cup.
Yeah.
You don't really get a settling in period, as you know, at the Old Firm or at Rangers. But maybe he kind of looks on last season as a kind of settling in spell for him, and he maybe needed that season under his belt, and maybe feels like coming back he's going to be a lot better this season. But I thought he looked good when he came on last night. He obviously stands up and takes a penalty, which was no surprise. And I just think with limited options, and I know obviously McInnes is he's no shy of playing kind of central midfielders out wide in the 4-4-2 as he did with Diomande last night, but he does like one. He said it last night post-match, like one ball carrier. I think at the moment his best bet with that is young Curtis. So even if it meant Curtis on the right and Asgard on the left, I think as it stands right now, that would maybe be my pick to start against United. But obviously, signings could impact that.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that is probably the best bet. Again, I'm not too sure that many Rangers fans will be utterly enthralled by that lineup. I don't think that's one that's going to sort of really get the juices flowing. But you're right in terms of Asgard. Obviously gets that goal over in the US against France in the group stages. It was pretty much a dead rubber, but it looks like a guy who's coming back with a bit of a swagger on his step, doesn't it? I mean, it looked like he's sort of taking that on, the confidence from that.
He was tackling as well.
Yeah.
Getting stuck in, which he didn't do last season.
Yeah, and obviously, as you say, bold enough. I mean, it was funny because I was laughing sitting in the press box last night because Majowski, having won the penalty, is turning around to the bench and pleading for him to get the penalty, and Asgard wasn't forgiving it up, and obviously dispatched it, fairly clinically as well. So yeah, listen, Derek McInnes basically threw the gauntlet down to Taylor Asgard last night in the press conference. As much as he, again, as I said earlier, will back himself to improve every player in the squad, he can only do so much. The players have to want this themselves, and that goes for Taylor Asgard more than anybody else because, again, as McInnes said, he's got all the tools there to be a footballer. You and I spoke repeatedly about this last year, about how if you were trying to draw up a perfect specimen for a footballer, Taylor Asgard pretty much ticks every box. Great balance, great physique, decent pace, good strength, great skill, but just doesn't seem to have that. Isn't able to put it all together. And we know that this environment up here is not the easiest place to find your feet, especially if confidence is low. And the way that last season started off, put every single player in the squad in the back foot, and especially Taylor Asgard, because he did come with that sort of a wee bit of pedigree, having done well down in the Championship, and this highlights reel of spectacular goals that he'd scored for Luton and for Wigan. I think it was people really saw him as a marquee signing last summer, and it just didn't happen. But listen, if it has to make it work, and McInnes is entirely right, because if he, how many more of these guys, if they go through another manager, if Derek McInnes becomes the latest guy to pay the price, these guys, they're not going to find themselves getting clubs anywhere near this ilk after this. This is, for a lot of these guys, this is last chance on. They have to make this work, otherwise their careers are going to be heading one way, and that's only downwards. So in terms of the team, I mean, I must say, I think Finlay Curtis, there's been a lot of hype around him just from last season, the way he ended at Kilmarnock, obviously get his World Cup call with Scotland, goal against Curaçao in the final send-off game. I just think a lot of fans last night would maybe look at his performance and go, okay, maybe we need to just calm things a wee bit. Yes, he's a prospect, but I don't think you can pin in your hopes that he's going to be Rangers starting left winger or right winger for the majority of the season. I still think there's an opportunity for him to go out and another loan this season, because I think if Rangers are going to be bringing in wider options, I think he finds himself back in the position he was in last year. He's still at the stage he needs to play games. I think he's a great option to have right now, but what's more important for his long-term development is he plays regularly, and if he's going to find himself stuck in the bench, I don't think that's great for him. I think that's a big decision that obviously will only be made closer to the deadline, transfer deadline, but I still think that's a possibility. I don't know your thoughts on that, Leonard.
That's interesting. No, I mean, I have to say I probably disagree. I think Curtis, he is ready now to go in and play for Rangers. I'm not saying he plays every single week or starts every single week, but if you're talking about having 4 wide players at the club, 2 on either side, then he's definitely one of them for me. I think he's done his loan stint. He's proved he can cut it in the Scottish Premiership, albeit at a kind of a provincial club in Kilmarnock. But no, now's the time for him. He's went to the World Cup. He's now in the Scotland squad. I think he'll stay there as long as he's getting enough minutes. Last night wasn't his best 45 minutes, but I still thought he gave Rangers a threat, and a confidence down the left-hand side that obviously he didn't have in the opposite flank. So, no, I don't think he'll go on loan again. I think McInnes will like him. I think he'll like his attitude. what I loved about him last night, Andy, for a kid so young, when St Etienne were on top in the first half, he was so clever at winning fouls, getting Rangers up the pitch. Normally, you'd expect that for the experienced guys. I thought for Curtis to be so young, and he's maybe picked that up just for being around guys in the Scotland squad.
A couple of John McInnes ones where he just stuck the arse out and locked their feet and just toppled over. I mean, listen, if you were being how did I say critical, you would say that's a wee bit, it's the dark arts in it. I mean, in that sense, I mean, it's but
got Rangers up the pitch and got them out of trouble a few times when they were kind of penned in, and I thought it was clever, and I do think he'll be. I think he'll be an important part of the squad this season. Obviously, that'll be up to the manager. And just in terms of McInnes, before we wrap up, he obviously had to kind of address post-match last night his SFA hearing. He's picked up a ban. He's picked up a ban for the SFA, and will have to spend the first few games of his Rangers managerial career in the stand. What do you make of the ban, and what do you make his kind of response to it last night? It was obviously quite strong on the game itself, being careful not to gag managers.
Well, I do think he's entirely right to fight his corner. And listen, you're never going to find a journalist sitting saying that managers should watch what they say after games. I mean, we thrive on them being able to, express opinions and express them forcefully. And he made the point, listen, broadcasters that pay an awful lot of money to, have access to managers straight after games, and then to be able to hear what they've got to say. And if you get to that, and sometimes it's a really difficult position for them to be put in. Like, if they're going to, they come straight off the pitch, out the dugout at full time. They get a camera stuck right in their face, and they are, being asked to give their opinion when the blood's pumping. Then sometimes you can get in these positions where, you might say something, you might overstep the mark, but I think he feels that he wasn't being malicious. He wasn't talking about John Beaton with the handball incident involving Celtic at Fir Park. He wasn't being in any way, malicious at the official. It was purely discussion, that one incident alone. He feels he's entitled to voice his opinion on that. I think obviously there's a feeling that there's precedent there. I think there was an incident involving Peter Grant when he was Alloa manager, 3-4 years ago. I think it was during the COVID season, where he used the exact same word, disgusting, and wasn't even cited, never mind banned. So, listen, he wasn't wanting to open up too much on it last night. I think we do have a clip. I'm not sure if we can show that just now, where he discussed his thoughts on it. But, Rangers will look to appeal. I think we can show that clip just now. Will we have a look at that?
Sorry, Dad, just on the hearing today, I know you can't say too much, but it's important that managers like yourself feel as though they can speak their mind without kind of crossing the line, because you're kind of in a situation at the end of this season with a lot of harm, and it's important that guys like yourself going forward can actually say what you think.
I've been a manager for 19 years now, and part of my job is you've got to, you're going to be asked on contentious decisions and all the rest of it. I've never wanted to make it ever personal, and and for me the decision was wrong, and I feel also I made my points at my appeal today, but I do think in general, it's broadcasters pay a lot of money to hear managers' reaction, and it's we've got to be careful that we don't have managers and players who I feel who have to be really sure of themselves and check themselves before answering a question. Should be, and at no point was I wanting to inflame a situation. The situation was already then discussed before I did my press, and it was quite big the moment in the season, and there was a lot of emotion, but I felt as though my what I said was controlled, and that's what the appeal process will now discuss and consider.
Yeah, and I think you probably summed it up pretty perfectly, Derek McInnes. I think the club are probably right to appeal it. As you say, they'll cite kind of past incidents and hope that kind of goes in their favour, because I think it'd be a blow to him. No, first few games as the Rangers manager, to have to sit in the stands. I do think it would have an impact. So it'll be interesting to see what the outcome of that appeal is. Sorry, what you saying?
No, you carry on.
No, just you would hope it will be resolved, and he can get in the dugout for these few games. Whether the whole ban will get wiped out, you would doubt it. But even if it get reduced on appeal, Derek McInnes would probably see that as a positive. So we need to wait and see what happens. Anyway, we're out of time. Thanks again, Andy. Thanks for joining us on the Record Rangers podcast, sponsored by NordVPN. Like and subscribe, keep the podcast going. That helps us out on all the usual platforms. And for all your Rangers news, keep track of the Daily Record and Record Sport online. Andy, until next time, thanks again.
Cheers, Scott.